You know the feeling. Maybe not today, but you know it. The morning you wake up and the weight is already there before you've even moved. The flat, gray hour where nothing feels worth doing. Where the future goes quiet and small. Where you scroll without seeing anything, just to keep from sitting alone with your own head. We have 100 modern words for this now. Burnout, depression, a funk. And we tend to assume it's a modern affliction, a side effect of screens and cities and lives that move too far from the way we were built to live. But that assumption is wrong. Your ancestors knew this darkness intimately. And what they did about it, tens of thousands of years before anyone had the word hope, tells you something about the only thing that has ever really worked against it. Because here is the strange truth buried in the archaeological record. Ancient humans did not just feel despair. They fought it, they built the first technologies against it, and one of those technologies was to drill a hole in a living person's skull. Start with what you'd expect. You'd assume that people fighting every single day just to eat had no spare capacity to feel hopeless. That despair is a luxury of comfort, something that only shows up once survival is handled. The opposite is true. A brain built to scan for danger, to grieve, to dread the winter, to feel the absence of the dead, is a brain that can absolutely collapse under its own weight. And the deeper researchers dig, the clearer it becomes that our ancestors were not numb to any of it. So what did they do with a person who had gone dark? Sometimes they operated. It is called trepanation, and it is the oldest surgery known to our species. Archaeologists have now recovered more than 1,500 trepanned skulls on every inhabited continent on Earth, some of them at least 7,000 years old. The procedure was exactly what it sounds like. A hole, deliberately scraped or drilled through the bone of a living skull, using nothing but sharpened stone. And here is the part that stops you cold. They survived it. The healed, smoothed bone growing back around the edges of those holes proves it. In his study of over 600 skulls, the researcher John Verano calculated a survival rate around 78%. In some regions, it reached 80, even 90%. To put that in perspective, in European hospitals during the 1800s, the same operation killed roughly 9 out of 10 patients. Stone Age surgeons were beating trained Victorian doctors by a mile. But why open a skull at all? Some cases were clearly head injuries. Yet a huge number of trepanned skulls show no wound, no fracture, nothing. Which points to a different reason entirely. For much of human history, when a person's mind turned against them, when they had seizures, or crushing headaches, or fell into a despair no one could explain, people believed something had gotten inside. A spirit, a darkness, a thing that did not belong. And the hole in the skull was a door, a way out for whatever was trapped in there. Think about what that actually represents. In a world with no concept of neurochemistry, no word for depression, our ancestors still understood suffering as something that could enter a person and be released. They were wrong about the mechanism, but they were not wrong that the darkness was real and that a suffering person deserved someone to try. But was cutting open a skull really the main answer? Far from it. Surgery was the last resort, the extreme edge. For the everyday weight, the ordinary despair, ancient humans had something far more powerful. They had the shaman. Across Paleolithic cultures worldwide, archaeologists find the traces of them. In trance, in dance, in the strange half-human, half-animal figures painted deep in caves. The archaeologist David Lewis Williams built a whole influential theory around it. The shaman was the person who could cross over, who could speak to whatever was on the other side and come back. And their real function was not magic, it was meaning. When you are drowning in a darkness you cannot name, the single most stabilizing thing anyone can give you is a story that makes the darkness make sense. The shaman gave the suffering a shape, a cause, a ritual, a way through. In a world with no therapists and no medicine, that framework was the medicine. And so what caught the ones a ritual alone could not reach? The group. And why would evolution build a mind that can sink that low in the first place? Because for a band animal like us, hopelessness was not just painful, it was dangerous, because despair pulls you inward and away, and for a human alone on the ancient landscape, away meant dead. So evolution wired the opposite instinct right into us, a pull back toward other people. And ancient cultures answered that pull with ritual. There is a whole field of research now on how grief and mourning rituals actually work, and the finding is consistent. Structured ritual, ancestor practices, the ceremonies a community performs together do not just mark loss, they build emotional resilience. They pull the suffering person back into the circle. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar has shown that the simple acts ancient humans did constantly, singing together, dancing together, grooming each other by firelight, flood the brain with the same bonding chemistry that holds a mother and child together. That was not entertainment. That was ancient humans, without knowing the word for any of it, dosing each other against despair. So the answer to what ancient humans did when they felt hopeless is not one thing. It is a stack of them. They gave the darkness a name through the shaman. They gave the suffering a ritual through the group. And in the most desperate cases, they picked up a stone and tried to cut the darkness a way out, and against every odds, most of those people lived. And every layer of that is still running inside you right now. Because when the gray weight comes, the thing that actually pulls you out of it is never the thing you'd expect. It isn't achievement, it isn't a screen, it is a message to one other person. It is the ritual of a walk, the same route every time. It is someone who gives the suffering a shape and tells you it will pass. None of that is modern. None of it was invented by medicine. 7,000 years ago, someone knelt beside a person lost in the dark and understood something we are still relearning. That a suffering mind is not a weakness to hide. It is a door that someone else has to help you open. That instinct, the one that makes you reach for another human when the weight is heaviest, is the oldest medicine your species has ever had. And it is still, after all this time, the one that works.